Welcome to VCF West 2019. This was actually my first time going to any vintage computer meetup, and I gotta say, I really enjoyed it. VCF West, though, has the privilege of being hosted at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California. I've never been there before, so I got in a day early and took advantage of the opportunity to walk through it, and man, it was really cool seeing some of the stuff they have there. Now, unusually, I actually had help while filming this, so you'll get to see some shots of me in this, and I really have to thank Chris, who helped me out with that. There were many sections on big IBM mainframes in the Computer History Museum, and it was pretty interesting to see those, though they really don't give you the full-scale idea of how these machines operated. While we're looking at some of the footage from the Computer History Museum, I actually have about an hour's worth of footage in total from this and VCF West, so I'm going to just pick out some of the stuff that was the most appealing to me. Oh, there were so many IBM typewriters all over the mainframe section. Let's see how many we can count. I'm not even sure we got them all on camera, so there's one. There were so many things that were interesting at the museum that it's been so long now I can't remember exactly what they were, but I think that drum in the background is used for memory, so it is a form of storage device, and it's got all those pins in it. I also really like the pin wheel up front. I suspect that's for loading programs, and it's a lot like a player piano. More computer parts need to look like they were pulled out of Star Wars Episode 1 Pod Racer. This was a really cool display that represents the scale of how much space would be needed to install some of these mainframes. That's meant to represent a building. I'm dreading the day I run into something that has this problem. The organic layers in the display filters are degrading and molding there. If you look in the background there, you can see a tape drive for that mainframe that uses springs to tension the tape. Oh, another IBM typewriter. This one's kind of an in-between Selectric 1 and Selectric 2. Kinda cool. Oh, we've got another IBM typewriter, but it's been expanded in the middle to fit more electronics. Oh, there were a couple of systems like this, I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure this is Xerox Alto, that have the corded key sets like that. I'm really curious about those now. The display tag for this says Beanbag Chair Replica. I love that. This whole area was the biggest, nerd checklist thing, where I was trying to see how many things I had and how many things I could at least name. And there were a couple that I couldn't name, like whatever this is, I forgot now. I can't read the display tag while voicing this over. There were a lot of goodies in this case as well. They have 4 or 5 speak and spells in the whole museum. It was crazy. Oh man, all these poor big box games that have clearly been facing the sun. Ugh. Another one of those corded key sets. I had to look it up when I got home to figure out what it was. They're pretty interesting. This was the last thing I got to see at the Computer History Museum. It's kind of in a separate area. It's the IBM 1401. Now, they didn't have this up and running while I was walking through the museum, so I didn't get to see it running then. But I did get to see it before the end of VCF, so we'll come back to that at the very end and see it in operation, because this thing is just stunning. But the next day, VCF West began proper. I was able to get in a little bit early, so I got this shot of everyone while they were just at the end of setting up. The big thing for VCF West 2019 was the meetup of the Apple I Owners Club, and there were just so many Apple I's there. Now, for most computer collectors, I would say that this is way outside the realm of something you're ever going to get into, or unless you build a clone, have that much interest in, because there are so few of these. I think they had 21 Apple I's there, and they got, I think, 17 or 18 of them functioning at the event. So yeah, there are not a lot of these out there. Matter of fact, it was kind of interesting. There was a security guard posted by all of the Apple I's at all times. They're so valuable. So yeah, it's definitely not a computer for the amateur enthusiast. But it was interesting because they had some of these set up for use. Like this one here had a SID chip connected to this extension board, and they were letting anyone come up and play it, which was kind of interesting. For most of the Apple I's that they had running, they put these fans beside them so they couldn't possibly overheat. And that is an original Apple I box. I can't imagine how many of those exist. Oh, also, there is BASIC on a cassette for the Apple I. Apparently it didn't have it loaded in ROM. I didn't know that until this event. Here's another Apple I running. And lastly, an Apple I for sale. This was a table for an auction house. They had this Apple I and a couple of Apollo pieces. Here are some things that I found while walking around the whole event. I'm not the biggest person for knowing every computer ever, so I haven't seen a lot of these. I don't actually know what a lot of these are offhand, but they were cool to see. I don't have any Amiga stuff yet, so this kind of thing is pretty foreign to me. You gotta have some Sharp 68000. I do know that one. And I think it might have been the only thing that was set up with the Roland SC55. Oh, the Coco stuff, it really doesn't get enough love, but this was a whole table set up for Cocos. Not only that, it had new parts being made for Cocos. It was really cool. This was awesome. This is a game of Monopoly that has been electronically modified. It has a computer underneath. It's a front panel computer, I forget exactly which one. And it's using these TI calculators as input devices. Super sweet. And it's an old build as well from the 70s. Oh, we have the Atari video. I had to ask him about this. I think that the TV isn't able to get a proper signal lock, and that's why it's displaying the channel number, because the Atari video outputs just kind of really weird video signals, as you could imagine, since it generates them from analog circuits. And of course, you gotta have a Commodore SX64. These were cool. A Kim 1 and an ST trainer. These are basically single boards that are meant to be put into a binder that have a complete computer on them, so you can learn to write machine language software through the hex keypad. If I remember correctly, these are RISC architecture laptops. Pretty cool, and this one is running Next Step. This was something I really enjoyed getting a chance to see. The same person who had the Kim 1 and ST boards had this Rockwell computer that is like those. It's a single board computer, but it has a one-line display that is bubble LEDs that are full alphanumeric. Those are sweet. And then it has this printer on it, which if I remember correctly was full mechanical, not dot matrix or anything like that. And you can do single lines of programming in Forth and then print the results on here. It's basically a super fancy desktop calculator. I've never seen anything like that. Maybe the HP stuff or the fancy Texas Instruments stuff is like that, but I haven't seen any of those with a full alphanumeric keyboard like this. I just thought this thing was super cool. This is an exhibit of all the IBM PCs, from the PC to the AT, including some interesting ones like the 5162, that was put on by someone I know named Jared. Now what's going on right here is Eric, who's also known as TubeTime on Twitter, has figured out how to use an original MDA card that came with the 5150 as a color card. So what he's doing here is running the program he wrote, which puts the MDA card into color mode and then displays a full color image. This is some kind of multi-sync monitor that can handle both the MDA and CGA signals. This is really cool and impressive. This was something that I saw and just found really, really cool. So this is a PET, but it's a CBM, so it's the Euro PET, or maybe they were called CBM later here, I'm not sure. Anyway, this is a live feed from a cell phone being run wirelessly to a laptop and then being sent to the PET to display as video. This is really cool. I mean, it's something that, you know, isn't necessary, but it's an awesome demonstration of just how powerful these machines could be given the right circumstances. And here you can see the PET being shown on the PET in real time. This was another display that resonated with me. The Atari 8-bit computers. I've actually had these in my collection longer than any other vintage computer, so I have a bit of a soft spot for them. Now, one thing I really badly wanted to see with all of this Atari stuff set up was a write cartridge for the 800, and they actually had one, so it was cool to know that they really do exist. I didn't take the opportunity to try it because that is a basic extension cartridge, and I don't know any of the commands offhand, and I didn't want to sit there looking stuff up on my phone, tying up the computer, but it was still really cool to see one in person. The Atari computers had these gigantic drives and add-ons that sit next to the monitor. They're kind of oppressive and awesome. I really like them. But they had a lot of stuff set up for the Atari things. This one in particular was cool. This was an old kiosk that played video controlled by the computer. Now, the original setup was using a laser disc that was controlled over RS-232, but in this, they had ripped the laser disc to video files and burned them to a DVD, and were controlling this through a DVD player. One of the big things at VCF are the events that happen on stage. I caught a couple of these. This is the Apollo Guidance Computer Simulation event. They had one of these actually scheduled, but then they did a couple of impromptu ones as well. So it was really cool to be able to see this happen in person. Curious Mark has done a repair series on an actual Apollo guidance computer, and this is one of the people who is on the team doing that. So it was really cool to see this being run by someone who knew all of the steps of this. I believe they put up all of these talks on the VCF YouTube page. Bill Hurd also gave a cool talk on the inevitable death of all of these vintage electronics. Now, this is something that spoke to me on a very unique level. So, the Computer History Museum had a team that was restoring an IBM 1602 front panel, trying to make it something that visitors of the museum could actually interact with. So they were recreating all of the inputs and the displays and the logic of an actual 1602 through just a couple of Arduinos stacked up on the back, and then multiplexing everything. So, in short, they were trying to make a replica 1602 out of real parts. Now, they needed a terminal for this, and they couldn't get their hands on the original IBM Electrostat type terminal, but they had access to wheelwriters, and those were very easy to modify. So what they ended up doing was creating a serial emulator board that interfaces between the keyboard and the logic board on the wheelwriter, and you can use the wheelwriter as a serial terminal. This is ridiculously cool. I actually spent a long time talking with them about this because I was fascinated by it. They have all of the design files open source. You can go and download the board designs, the BOM, the source code, and then make one yourself. Because this was a project made by the Computer History Museum, they're not really in the market to try and sell these boards themselves. So that it's not something that you can just buy as a complete kit. I'm definitely going to be checking this out at some point. It's just kind of a high barrier to entry. The entire BOM cost is about $150, not including the typewriter. This is a seriously impressive project. This is a large-scale implementation of a 6502 CPU as a giant PCB with discrete MOSFET logic. It is super cool. Here, the one in the wood horizontal case is actually running a game that you can play right next to it, and it's pretty cool. This project is also by Eric, who did color on the MDA card, and I did a little bit of an interview with him about the Monster 6502. So let's hear what he has to say about it.
I'd like to talk to you about one of the projects that I've been working on here. This is the Monster 6502, which is the world's largest 6502 processor chip. I started with the visual6502.org reverse engineered netlist from an original 6502 chip, and I turned that into the schematic and a PC board layout of a full-sized discrete transistor 6502. It works just the same as the original, it runs all the same code, and it even has all the same bugs and quirks. The Monster 6502 runs at 1/20th the speed of the original, mostly because the components that I'm using are physically larger than they are on a chip. And because they're larger, that means they have more capacitance. More capacitance means that they operate slower. So that's kind of the 10-second overview of why it runs at 50 kilohertz instead of 1 megahertz. Other than that, it's functionally identical and pin compatible. So we've operated the Monster 6502 in a couple of different computers that are mostly hobby computers because of the simple fact that most computers that you could buy at the time ran as fast as they possibly could to give you the best performance. And so there's very few computers that will let you slow down the clock speed and retain full functionality. And so we've operated it in the Cactus 6502 as well as the retro Arduino breakout board. So that actually worked quite well in both those computers.
Now, the computer called the Cactus that he mentioned is a homebrew DIY front panel computer using a 6502 as its processor by Commodore Z, and I interviewed him about his project as well.
Alright, so the Cactus here is a 6502 machine built as if it was the 1970s using the homebrew techniques available at the time and primarily the parts available at the time. But what makes it unique is that it's got a front panel and a 6502 on the same platform, which is kind of strange. Now, a couple of years ago, I spotted something, the OSI 300, a miniaturized replica is what I've got here, not a real one. But it's just you, the 6502, some RAM, switches and LEDs, and you can program on this and learn the opcodes such that you can then move on to a more powerful machine and send this back to the manufacturer, and OSI would let you, would discount you whatever price you paid for this towards one of their more powerful machines for all those lacked front panels. So I saw a real one a couple of years ago, and I thought, that's fantastic. I want one. This guy comes out with a kit, which was only short-lived, a guy by the name of Christopher Bachman. And I was like, well, I'll just buy the kit, I'll play with that. And I realized really quickly how finicky the front panel was compared to big stuff, in-size, Altairs, PDAs, where you had a full range of switches. But it wasn't until I found something else. Grant Cyril created this very minimal 7-chip 6502 machine. I've got one right over here, though, and you can run BASIC from it. Very easy to get set up and going. And for the first time ever, memory map on a 6502 made sense, and I wondered, can you combine a OSI 300 style front panel and the simple 6502 machine into one computer? Can that be done? So I started working on the Cactus, and as I'm going through, I started finding other machines. For example, November 1977 issue of Byte magazine has something called the Computar. It's spelled all funny. But it's got 20 pages of instructions, give or take, on how to build this machine from scratch. Whether or not anybody else built one, I don't know, but it's a very strange computer for a front panel. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. Months later, I discovered something called the CGRS Microtech System 6000. It's an S100 machine. It's got a front panel. It's a little different, but it relies on the CPU card in a strange way to use its front panel. How many of these actually sold, I have no idea. They made like 10 or so versions, and 3 of them had the front panel. I've never seen a complete machine. A friend of mine is loaning me just the front panel from his. And so after seeing those, I thought, all right, well, what actually goes into making one? I had my ideas, I came across theirs, then I start building mine. So the Cactus here is built up into 2 sections. We've got a section for handling the serial component, RAM, ROM, and the serial adapter itself, and of course the 6502. And then the other half of the machine is just logic to run the front panel. Over half the chips are just dedicated to that task. So it's kind of a state machine, and it's 100% independent from the CPU. We can completely detach it, and it will still allow you to move through memory. Alright, so the machine is sitting here waiting for us to tell it what to do. Right now, the front panel component is taking charge. So we've got our status control switches, data control switches, address control switches. We can see what address we're at up here. So we can say, visit a location and do an examine. And notice the lights and LEDs now match. Once we're at that location, it copies whatever is at that location down into a temporary space that we can work on stuff. We can mess with bits as we need to, or if we decide, well, that's not quite what we wanted, we can do a re-examine and bring back in what's actually at that memory location. Then we can increment our way through the address space. Now you notice there's a little bit of a delay between this row and this row. This is actually the data bus, and this is the temporary workspace. So it has to take a second for it to go through those operations. This set of green LEDs up here is a software-controlled output buffer. Now, what if we want to actually make changes to stuff? We can make our changes, we can do a deposit, or if we want to make rapid changes, we can hit a deposit. Next. Changes, deposit next, changes, deposit next, etc. And all that timing is handled by this guy right here, which is the status control card, and it's telling the other cards, okay, you load this, you load that, and keeping the sequencing correct so it's nice and easy to use. Now, right now we've got BASIC in here, so let's actually come over to that. If I hit run and then reset, the front panel has been disengaged, and there we go. We are now running BASIC. The front panel is locked down such that we can't do anything of consequence with it. I can press these switches and nothing's going to be messed up. we can now type in a program like, say, 10 print hello, 20 go to 10, and away we are.
The Cactus can be run by the Monster 6502 with a small modification for timing. And this is pretty cool to see because there is absolutely nothing original or stock going on here. But it is massively impressive, these two projects coming together. Alright, back to some other stuff. The VCF event has a consignment area where you can purchase things, and I didn't expect to be tempted by stuff here, but wow, there was so much more going on and available than I would have guessed. I really badly wanted this clone Apple II drive for reasons that'll be made apparent in a later video, but needless to say, I regretted flying. Alright, here's another interview that was a lot more interesting than I originally expected, and it has to do with the Apple Pippin.
Okay. So the Bandai Pippin is basically Apple's Xbox back in the 90s. It was released in 1996, and it was built by Bandai, built and marketed, sold by Bandai, but the tech inside was essentially a PowerMac 7500 with a downclocked 603 PowerPC processor. But the reason I'm showing it this year is because for the past 20 years, the only software you've been able to run on the Pippin is software that came out during the Pippin's heyday, stuff that was signed by Apple, because in every ROM of a retail Pippin, there is code that will spot check 5 or 6, I think 6, 128K chunks of the disk that you insert to make sure that it was signed by Apple and was approved to run on the Pippin. If it doesn't pass, if it doesn't match the digest on the disk, then it ejects it and you can't boot from it. That was the case until about a month ago when I developed this disk called Pippin Kickstart. This is signed. I was able to extract the public key from the ROM, which is a 360-bit RSA key, trivially cracked in 2019. I got it cracked in about 18 hours. So I can sign whatever I want, but until I get that utility ready, I've got this boot disk that you can just download from my site. It's about 4 meg ISO. Burn it to CD. It verifies itself correctly and then just re-enters the ROM and looks for boot devices, but skipping the authentication check, letting you boot from whatever you want. So being essentially a Power Mac inside running System 7.5, it runs a lot of Mac software. And I just picked Spectre because I like Spectre, and it does a pretty good job showing off the Pippin.
Do people not like Spectre?
Exactly. Well, I've had people stop by that's like, I played this game before. Where have I played this game? Like, did you play on a Mac Performa in the 90s? Because it was on every Mac that Apple sold in the 90s.
Yeah.
Next was an exhibit about a new development board based around older tools, which was kind of cool, but unfortunately, the microphones I was using for all of these interviews weren't that great. Now, for all of the other interviews, I was able to process the audio to get the person I was talking to's voice up above the murmur of the crowd, but for this one, there was a presentation going on the stage, and this booth was like 20 to 30 feet away, so the PA speakers blew out the microphone and you can't hear anything.
You are connected. So you can use this board.
I didn't know this when I was recording, so unfortunately, I'm going to have to talk over what's going on here. So this project is Maker Lisp, a small 50 megahertz EZ80 based system with 1 megabyte of RAM. It's primarily used through a serial interface and can be programmed on a computer. Now, this has expansion add-ons that you can get to add USB keyboard support, GPIO, and VGA. And with some of these add-ons, it can even be its own self-hosted development environment, which is pretty cool for something that's meant to be kind of like an Arduino. Now, the entire language environment is based around Lisp, with the intention of being easy to learn. So it's a language that has a foundation already and a reasonable amount of support. You can also run the programming environment on Linux, so you don't have to buy the development boards to start to get familiar with it. He's hoping to be able to make this an educational-based system and provide some curriculum activities for teachers to be able to use. Another fun part of VCF West for me was getting to meet some of the people that I've interacted with online in person. And I had a few people come up and say hi to me who watched my videos, and I just wanted to say thank you for anyone who did that. It is always really fun to actually see people who enjoy my videos in person. And now for something that I was beyond excited to be able to have the opportunity to see, the IBM 1401 running. I didn't think I was going to get a chance to see this because it's only run at certain times during the day and VCF was going on, so I didn't know if it was going to overlap in a way that would make sense, but It did, thankfully, so I got to check it out. Now, they went through a good portion of the history of the machine and why people would buy it and how they got theirs, which was really fascinating to hear. If you're ever in Mountain View and have a chance to go to the Computer History Museum, I highly recommend doing it and trying to get into one of these presentations. This was really fun. They spun up all the tape drives for the 1401. I mentioned the spring-tensioned tape drive they had for one of the other mainframes in the museum. This is a vacuum-tensioned tape drive. So there is nothing touching the tape other than the capstans, the pulleys, and the read-write heads. Now, the majority of this machine is actually operated by punch card. You don't have a keyboard that you type the program into on the machine itself, you do it on punch card. Now, at the end, anyone who wanted to do this was actually allowed to. They have a program that prints your name in really large text on the line printer they have, and you could come up and type in your name on one of the punch card machines. They will then take the punch card, feed it into the punch card reader, and then have the system read and print out your name. One fun thing is that the machine's not that fast, so even when it comes to something as simple as printing text, you can actually watch it operate. I had the opportunity to talk to one of the operators after the demonstration was finished, and he gave me a little bit of a look at the line printer, which I found fascinating because it doesn't use a typing element like a Selectric or hammers like a typewriter. It has a chain of characters that strike this massive ribbon. That black thing, that's the ink ribbon at multiple points on the paper, and it's just so cool. But that is it for my time at VCF West 2019. I really enjoyed that event. It was so much fun to go around, see so many computers, meet so many people who are passionate about these computers. It's something that I would really recommend anyone go check out. And there are a lot of opportunities to do that. VCF has events all around the country, and there are even some less sanctioned ones, let's say. So you should definitely go check out any of the ones that are nearby you. There probably is one. Well, that pretty much wraps it up. I want to give a thank you to Chris, who not only shot footage for me, but also gave me a ride to and from the airport, and Foon, who gave me a ride one day to VCF. I'm really appreciative of that. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed this look at VCF West 2019. I'd say there's a very strong chance I'll be going to another one of these, and maybe even presenting. Who knows? This one just happened the week after LTX, so I was kind of strained. But that's it for now. I'll see you next time.